In 1955, at the start of the Vietnam War, those enlisting in the armed forces and volunteering for deployment did so believing that it was their obligation to fight the Communist Party and protect their nation's sovereignty. Though U.S. involvement in this war was widely controversial, over 9 million Americans served and 2.6 million Americans were actively stationed in Vietnam. Those that served were incredibly young, and somewhere between 7,000 and 11,000 of those serving were women.
I think that there were certainly a lot of people who got into this war thinking they were doing the right thing, signing up for draft and signing up as nurses and trying to be part of it. I think as time went on and as protests start happening and they actually get over there and start realizing that this is a civil war that we probably have no place in.
When I began my research project, my intent was to analyze women's involvement overseas and discuss the ways that their roles differed from roles of combats of the past. However, what I learned was that female liberation was actually mostly self-empowerment rather than an idealism that came along with women taking on male roles.
So women have always been there, but their role wasn't seen as really particularly important as far as history goes because they weren't acknowledged in historical texts until relatively recently.
So what role did Vietnam play in this female liberation era? The Vietnam War brought women together. It gave women from all races, economic backgrounds, and walks of life a platform. It empowered women to speak their minds and to fight for what they believed in. The Vietnam War stirred up a lot of mistrust in the government. This mistrust in the government gave staying power to political positions such as the feminist movement and African American civil rights liberation.
During the 1950s, after World War II, women were encouraged to stay home, have children, take on their more traditional roles after they had been told to go into the workforce and to participate, and that was patriotic. And so there's kind of a mixed message being sent, and I think once the cat gets out of the bag, it's really hard to put them back in their place. So women take on a more active role through the civil rights movement. They start going to college in greater numbers, and they really start coming into their own in the 60s as far as participating on the national stage. They are seen at protest marches. They're highly educated. They're really demanding their place in society, and you see that in the dawn of the 70s when they actually start fighting for their own rights.
As is seen by the bars to the left, women had a significant increase in labor force participation in the late 1960s and early 1970s. The birth rate started at rather high in 1963 with an average of 3.319 children per woman. As is expected, the birth rate declined significantly during the war. At the end of the war in 1975, reaching a low of 1.7 children per woman. But what is significant is the birth rates following the war. You'll note that while the birth rates did increase significantly, they are nowhere near as high as they were at the beginning of the 1960s. So while women did play an active role in overseas action during the Vietnam War, it was their domestic actions that made them the unsung heroes. They refused to leave their jobs, they pursued an education, and they fought for their rights. The Vietnam War and the civil uproar just gave them the means to do so.